Ladies and gentlemen, from the depths of flyover country in the heartland of America, the Kansas City on the other side of the mighty Mo. Welcome to Hitting the Bricks with Kathleen, the do-it-yourself genealogy podcast that features your questions and her answers. I am John, your humble hubby host, and on this episode, we'll be talking about trains without parents. So let's start hitting the bricks. Okay, so hi. And is it morning? Yes. See, again, we do this at my prime time of the day that I absolutely hate, and it's 1 o'clock.
You're the one who set the time, John.
I know, because I'm a masochist.
Okay. A little more information than what anyone needs, but go ahead.
Not that kind of masochist.
Okay. Okay.
It shows you who you are. Immediately, you go to the whips and chains and the locked room with the flashing lights. But me, I was talking about more of a mental emotional state. But okay.
That was pretty descriptive.
So speaking of abuse, we're going to talk about orphan trains, right?
Well, it's not necessarily abuse. So, you want to talk about the orphan trains or the orphan train riders?
Well, I let's see where the conversation goes. Okay. Because that's kind of a big deal about it, because I do kind of wonder, was this just child trafficking? What are we getting into here?
Interesting way of putting that. I had never heard that analogy, but it was a form of moving children who had no say-so. And some of these children were not really orphans. Some of them were half orphans. Their mom or dad were still alive, but they couldn't afford them. So
let's get a time frame. When was this?
It started around 1854.
Mm-hmm.
To about 1922 or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was 75 years.
Wow.
Of transporting children. It started from the East Coast to the Midwest because supposedly the Midwest was more holistic and they were good Christians and they had big farmlands, and that means you're closer to God.
Oh, so they were transporting the Charles Dickens form of New York little urchins. They were bagging them up and sending them off to Aunt Jill's farm, basically, where they could find God and a good work life. That is absolutely true. So wonderful.
The religious part was actually in their contract when they took in an orphan. The whole thing was started by a minister that he really liked the way Germany, and I believe it was Germany and maybe England did it, but he was copying it from that platform. And his idea was, with all these waifs, all these orphaned children, unkept, unfed, and needing a place. They were homeless children, whether or not they had a mom or dad alive, that they could help them by moving them and getting the Midwest involved. So they were moving these boys, especially across country to the Midwest, to be farmhands. And they were actually monitored. People came back out every so often when the train came back through to check on the kids that they had placed and try to make sure that they were getting exactly what they were promised.
I understand that, because the United States showed itself to be a bastion of well-regulated oversight in the 1920s, especially when it came to child labor. I can assume that they were right there when they needed to be, making sure that everybody got to school, had shoes, and put in a 6-hour day on the farm, right?
The intent was good. That is true. The execution is never as idealistic as you want it to be.
No, of course not.
So there are some stories that are horrific of little girls and little boys, or even teenage kids, because remember, the orphans that were being sent out in general were not, most of them were not legally adopted. The orphan train was our precursor to our foster homes of today.
Let's step out of that then. Let's step away from the train for a minute. Baby boxes and foundling hospitals. Are these a stop on the Hogwarts Express of pain and suffering to the Midwest?
My goodness. And the answer is yes.
Okay.
And we call them foundling versus baby boxes. You could do this anonymously. You could put your little baby in kind of a turntable type thing and deliver it without giving any information.
A lazy Susan, right? Like you did with fondues in the 70s. You could just spin it around, right? And
the Catholic foundling homes, those drop-off stations could be anonymous. And a lot of them, mothers might put a note on their child, giving it a description with the name, the date of birth. They might even have left their names, but often that's not the case. Often they were registered in the book of the foundling homes. Mm-hmm. They were registered in the books of the foundling homes as a baby girl, blue-eyed, dropped off on this date. So later, though, mm-hmm. these people, if they knew where they were adopted from or orphaned out of, or they could see it in a newspaper, what train came through, what date, they were able to go back to that foundling home and actually find their own original information.
Okay, so that actually helps me. Well, it takes me to another question that I have. And that is, I need to do some research on an orphanage. I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
But if somebody is looking for, now I'm assuming that maybe through folklore, you hear that your great-great-grandmother or grandfather came to Iowa at the turn of the century on an orphan train. What sort of records am I looking at? How am I able to trace that? Am I going through, the Rock Island Railroad and looking for what sort of cargo was shipped? Or
okay, let's back up on the train itself.
Okay.
The trains were used because their discounts were given. The trains were quite widespread. By 1890, remember, these orphans really went to all 48 states.
Right.
It was cost efficient.
Well, I'm sure for some reason in my head, I'm thinking, I just wonder, was it altruistic, or were they actually, receiving money from one place to another place in order to transport the kids? Because it's hard to believe that they
were given discounts. They did give a lot of the people discounts. I mean, a lot of the organizations discounts to transport these children. They were paid.
And there was how many, like on an orphan train?
An orphan train could have as few as 3 or 4, or it could have over 20. We have mm-hmm. pictures of them coming into town, going mm-hmm. to a station, excited. They would then stand on the platform of the station and people would pick them. Now, those are the orphans themselves. The right. baby trains were different, John.
Oh, there's a difference between orphan trains and baby trains. There were baby trains? It's a baby train.
They normally weren't paraded on a platform. They were pre-ordered, John.
They pre-ordered. Wait a minute. Okay, so now we're getting into the world of, I want a blonde hair, blue eye.
Exactly, girl or boy.
And so he'll match the rest of my kids.
Well, that's interesting also, mm-hmm. because you can say, I want a Christian only. I want not only Christian, I prefer them not to be Catholic. Mm-hmm. I would prefer, a Protestant, or that you could say, I want a Jewish child. You could put in what your order was for this child. And that child was assigned at the originating place. And then when these are babies, right? Under the age of 3, usually. Right. And when they were taken to that spot where we're supposed to meet, those mm-hmm. people already had a number, like number 52. They had to just go and get the baby with the number 52. Those children were normally anonymous. Mm-hmm. The names of those children and the names of those who were taking the children, because those children were supposed to be adopted as their own, not necessarily legally adopted, but put into the family and treated as their own. So this is totally different than the older kids who were used more for farmhand or an indentured. They were supposed to have kids indentured to the age of about 18. Mm-hmm. or 16. Some of these children continued on for one reason or another. But that kind of contract was already set up front. You knew what you were contracting to. You knew what the children were supposed to do. A lot of the guys, once they became old enough to even join the military, they just left the farm and went and joined the military. So that's where I find a lot of their records. And when they ask, where did you live? They might say, I was living in Lyons, Kansas, but I was born in New York.
That's actually interesting, and also a little bit odd that we're hearing about children basically being contractually or indentured. This is obviously without consent.
The difference is that they had certain rules. Like I said, they weren't supposed to work, but so what much? You weren't supposed to do certain things to them. You were supposed to provide them with clothing. You were supposed to only make sure they're educated and that they have a religious background. That didn't always happen. Not a lot, but there were quite a few children who were definitely abused one way or the other.
I also have a question on whether Native American children were drawn up in this, because I know there was a concerted kind of...
No, they were part more of the assimilation projects. They were taken away to assimilate into what America considered the new culture or their correct culture.
And the
idea was to, yes,
it's the word we always throw about.
It is to civilize them. And that is a total different podcast, John.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Well, it's always interesting when we get into these things, and I always make kind of light of certain things, but they're not. They get into some very serious issues and topics. But I find it interesting that so many of the things that people say those were the good old days were such bad days.
It was such bad days for a lot of people.
I mean, our good old days were just not that great for a whole lot of people.
So, for example, the Italians, the Armenians, they were considered colored. They were not considered white until after 1907. So they were treated differently than the others. Oh, and the Finnish also. Then you also had the Black orphan trains.
Oh, interesting.
And they were treated totally different. Now, there were Black children on the white trains also. And we can find them. I found one recently in Nebraska who came out. All the white children had their names and ages attached to who they actually went to. The Black child says he's going to J.M. Bennett, and who J.M. Bennett took, who was a leader of this community, was the colored boy. That's all it said. No age, no name, nothing identifying him. So you could see that he came with these other children.
Wow.
And they're all, normally I do a lot of newspaper searches when I really want to narrow down to who's supposed to be on the train, who isn't on that train. And when I did that, that's what came up. Now, later I do find him as an older guy, and he did take the Bennett name. They could do whatever they wanted at that point, legally or not.
So researching these, it seems like you're going to be diving into a lot of different areas. There's everything from train to, like you said, you would look at the military records.
I look at military records, the trains, not the trains. I'm sorry. The military records, the institutions, the newspapers. I'm looking at the National Orphan Train Museum, the complex, and National Orphan Train Complex is what it's called. And they have about 7,000 in their database, but that's 7,000 out of almost 300,000.
Wow.
Well, we do know it's definitely upward of 250,000.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to start, but it's a small sampling.
Small segment. Now that we're talking about researching and the institutions, here comes my question on my family. My half-brother.
It's always about you, isn't it?
It is always. My dad, well, I'm not going into all of that. So my oldest brother, my half-brother.
Yes.
He was in an orphanage in Los Angeles.
Yes, he was.
When he was young. And so we're talking about the late 40s. And maybe not the late 40s. It would have been. I think
it's somewhere around 1940.
Because he was born in 1937.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around 1942, somewhere between 1942 and 1948.
Okay, so between 1942 and 1948, he's in a place, and I know he called it Brownies, and that's pretty much all I know about where he would have been. Now, my dad honestly describes it as it was a boarding school. That is not the description Bob gave, and Bob told some stories of one bathtub and everybody taking a bath on the same day of the week, or at least a series of kids, and that you wanted to get in early because otherwise you were bathing in everybody else's dirt and there was sand in the bottom of the tub by the time he got out. I do remember
Bob telling us that story.
Okay, yeah. And one of the other things that I thought was interesting is that he said that Brownie,
yes,
the person who ran it, was a woman. who was
Right.
African American, and that it was an interracial.
That's
it was
correct.
a mixed, it was a mixed orphanage. Having that little information, where am I in this search?
So let's first make sure everyone's clear.
Mm-hmm.
Bob was not on an orphan train.
No.
Okay. So Bob was not on an orphan train. His father and mother were living.
Yes.
His father was working far away, distantly. His mother was right there in the city.
Right.
It's possible, just to have a little grace here, John, it's possible that your father paid to have Bob at the orphanage. So that's why he said it was a boarding home. That's possible.
That would be my assumption.
But it really was an orphanage based on Bob's experience.
Mm-hmm.
How would you start, or what would you do looking for where this is? I would start with the city directories.
Mm-hmm.
There was an apartment because Bob's mother lived in it. Your father had it. And I have seen a few with your father's name in the city directory.
That's right. You were doing some digging on this a while back.
I was just kind of glimpsing though.
Mm-hmm.
And you would start with the city directories for that time frame. Then you would take a great big circle and give yourself about a 5-mile radius of where was the closest orphanage. Again, the city directories can help that also, as well as city maps, and you would start there. It is not uncommon for Los Angeles during that time frame to have interracial orphanages. So I have seen quite a few. One of them, a white fella, was in an orphanage and became a judge, and he really talks about this Black guy who communicated and found him much later in years, and how they laughed about their experience as orphans.
The time as orphans.
Yeah. So I personally start with the largest because Bob's experience sounded like it was a pretty big one, but you're looking for boys' homes, right? So it might not just be the word orphanage might not be the name.
Right.
It might say asylum, boys' institution, boys' home.
Okay.
It can have a lot of other words.
There's a whole lot of other words in there that I need to incorporate in starting to do kind of the searching. And you're saying the city directories.
I would start with that city directory, first finding your father because he had a rental property there. He was renting rather. And
right. Gotcha.
And so I would start with finding him in a city directory and seeing if we can find him that way. I'd also pull some of his records because you kind of know where he worked. And
Your dad or Bob? Your
dad.
Right.
He also was coming in and out from Alaska. He might have been on a ship, so we can look at some ship records. Okay. The idea is first start with your dad. Let's place him. And then we can put Bob in the correct proximity.
Okay, cool. Now, I know everybody's thinking they could do that over breakfast. They don't have to do that on our time. So we're taking a podcast time to talk about my stuff. So
this is what we do, period. With Hitting the Bricks with Kathleen.
I'm going to apologize because everybody's like, hey, you can talk to him on your own time. Don't talk to him on our time. So wait a minute. Let's just run back into real quick. Let's run back into what we started with and look at the orphan trains and general orphanage research. If we haven't closed that out yet, I don't know.
No, believe it or not, exactly what I just told you is exactly what everyone else is doing for their ancestors.
So orphan trains, it would kind of work the same way.
It's the same way. I was recently looking for a particular orphan who was in Kansas, I think. And when he got to Kansas, we knew nothing about him except 2 brothers and there was a sister. Well, later, by doing exactly what I told you, I was able to narrow it down, find the family that they were with, find that one went to the military and moved away. And then I was able to trace them back to the original orphanage in Brooklyn based on a military record. That particular father had to go to Sing Sing because he killed the mother in front of those 3 children.
Again, a lovely story. What was the time frame of this?
1918-ish, I think.
Yes, the turn.
I'm not really
I'm telling you, this country was a real interesting place to live in 1918. The what I should be looking for, what anybody should be looking for when we're talking about orphanages, is not getting stuck on the word orphan.
There's two words we shouldn't get stuck on, John, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Right.
One is the word orphan, because there's so many other words. An orphan train is a new wording as of like 1970s.
Wow.
So they called it placing out children. So what they actually did is not as cynical as you think it is. They literally were trying to find these children safer places to be.
Oh, I understand that.
So they had good intentions. Just keep that in mind. And most of the children did have a good experience. They even have reunions. They remember the other orphans who traveled with them on the train, who went to nearby schools, and some of them went to the same schools. They stayed actually close. The stories are really beautiful, except for those who aren't. We have to keep all of that in mind. And as we're looking for all of this, you have to remember that there was a reason this child was without a parent that could care for them, either money or death or disease, or the older ones could have just ran back out on the streets, but they were hungry also and cold in New York and Boston and Pennsylvania and all these places. And again, as I said, we also see them going not only to one home, but I have one girl who went to 10 different homes before she was settled. But the idea is to get these children placed. Children of color and Black children were still also placed in on these trays, but they were treated differently how they were placed. Sometimes there was an agency at the other end to receive them. So from New York to Kansas, a lot of the Black children went to Leavenworth, where there was a Black orphanage in Leavenworth. And then that orphanage placed them in Black homes.
Very, very interesting.
So did I answer all your questions on orphans and orphan trains?
Yes, all my questions were answered. And it really is an extremely interesting topic, and something I truly, until you started with presentations and doing this sort of research, I had no idea. Okay, so I'm thinking that you have some other news. I think you have some good news, don't you?
I do have good news.
Let's have some good news.
Okay, well, Hitting the Bricks with Kathleen has a wonderful sponsor now.
Yay.
My Heritage and Legacy Family Tree webinars and Legacy Family Tree software. We are being sponsored by them.
Oh, fantastic.
And I have mentioned them on several podcasts because my mother, my brothers, myself, and several cousins are all on My Heritage.
Well, I'm on My Heritage for DNA.
Yes. And it is one of my favorites because of their tools, their research tools. And
you always
wonderful.
talk about getting people crossed over. If they've done it in one place, they need to always transfer it over to My Heritage.
I would give you a big kiss if you were in this room, because I didn't know you listened to me.
This is why I would like to combine the studio into one room.
So I could walk over and just give you a kiss
so I
when
can
you
get my
do
hugs
something.
and kisses.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's wonderful. That's really good news. I'm happy to hear that, and we look forward to this. As far as the sponsorship goes, are we able to pass that on to our listeners?
Absolutely. We will be giving away some of these packages, the complete package.
Yay.
We have quite a few giveaways we can give.
Fantastic.
And
that's from the generosity of
My Heritage.
My Heritage and Legacy Tree.
Legacy Family Tree webinars.
Fantastic.
Okay, John, we have just completed 1 year of the podcast.
1 year?
Yes.
Have we been doing this for a year?
Absolutely, John. We started last January.
I assume that I'm eligible for profit sharing now?
No, there is no profit to be shared. I am so sorry, but there is no profit to be shared.
Do I get medical? Do I get lunch? Maybe I get a sandwich?
Well, congratulations. You've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for staying. Thanks to My Heritage and Legacy Family Tree webinars. Thanks to Chewy Chewbacca Brent, our part-time phrenologist and full-time witless worm, for his unwavering lack of interest in anything we're doing. The theme song for Hitting the Bricks was written and performed by Tony Fistknuckle and the Bosons. Watch for their next appearance at the Rings of Saturn. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and of course Buzzsprout. We'd love to hear what you think about the podcast, so stop by our Facebook page at Hitting the Bricks with Kathleen and let us know.